Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to be joined by Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer. Also joining us is Sarah Mitchell, in charge of our documentation here at Alpha. Dion is going to give you I believe, a short presentation at the beginning, but he and Sarah, and for that matter me, are here to answer your questions. And you can type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dion. Are you there?
Yes, sir. How am I coming through? Okay.
Loud and clear. Let me go ahead and make you the
Dynamite,
presenter.
dynamite. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Going to have a lot of fun today. We actually have an outstanding presentation that's been put together and ready to go that our esteemed colleague Sarah will be helping us out with. Interesting enough, came from one of our loyal viewers and a question from there. I also have another question that came in. I'd like to go ahead and share that with everybody. And we'll see where our time is. But most importantly, we're here for your questions. So make sure you go to the GoToWebinar control panel, go into the questions section, ask your questions. They will be monitoring it very closely, excuse me. And also along with that, we always love your question at guides@alphasoftware.com. Now, heads up, right now, we're tying up a lot of loose ends from the Kanban, the list control, and other pieces like that. We're also going to show really cool HTML capability today, Sarah is, which is a very powerful one because it really can enhance your user interfaces in a huge way by just using standard HTML, CSS capabilities. But we are also going to be diving into the newer inline editing of the list control. I think that's such a critical new feature. It's really new. It's in the pre-releases, and we want to dive into that. So in the very near future, we'll be doing a series on that, just kind of explore it in more detail. And we find that it's going to really have a huge enhancement for people who want to move from grids over to the list. It's one of the key things that people were holding out was inline editing, but it also opens up a huge new way to use the list component, which we'll explore to create more modern, interesting user interfaces and, more important, user experiences. And that's one key thing we want to focus on is how do we make the user experience for people who are using your Alpha applications the best possible. I mean, mobile platforms have had a dramatic impact on how people interact with information and data through a mobile platform. And the list control is a key aspect to allow us to take advantage of all those new paradigms. And the new inline list editing is another element in that sort of foundation of creating extremely powerful user experiences for your folks. And again, not limited to mobile, you can also use it on desktop web. There's a lot of really fun stuff we'll do. And actually, down the road, we anticipate that it will dramatically simplify the complexity of your apps because you'll be able to do more with less, which is always an important aspect. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to actually turn it over to Sarah, who's put together a really cool presentation, came in on a question, and actually a feature that was included in our Amazon demo that was done by Selwyn in the development team. A really cool feature that I think you can see not only can be used for the mobile kind of applications, but all of your type of applications. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sarah. And Sarah, I am seeing your screen. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and hush up now.
Excellent.
You didn't mean
Thank
it that way.
you. You guys can hear me okay, right?
Yep, loud and clear. Thanks.
All right, great. So I want to talk about this question came in via email, which, speaking of questions, if you haven't already sent us your questions, please do that. You can type them in the questions box of the GoToWebinar, or you can email us at guides@alphasoftware.com. We always want your questions because it helps us, choose what we're going to talk about these things. And today we're going to talk about badge notifications. And if you're not sure what a badge notification is, it's this little red number that's right here. It says 1. It means something, there's a message here for me, something has changed, and it's a small notification to the user that there is an actionable item for them to go interact with. In Alpha, we do have that Amazon lookalike shopping app, and it does have a badge notification. You can see up here is this shopping cart, and it has a little 1 on it indicating there's 1 item in the shopping cart. So stated before, the badge notification is meant to alert the user that something has changed. They don't interrupt the user interface significantly. They're a little subtle. It can be something like you have an unknown message, you have an item in your shopping cart, or it could be a new feature. Some applications, some web applications will use a notification to notify you that there's something you haven't interacted with ever. Maybe it's a new page that, or a new setting or something like that that you can use to control something or a new game. So these are like 3 common uses. There are more than this. You can use these for whatever you need. And in terms of how they're built, they use CSS borders, and by and large, I haven't seen these notifications get built with anything besides just some CSS styling around some text, or even using pseudo classes with the after selector and populating the content of that from some attribute on the control. So this is a really basic common example you'll see out there. This is from a website. And on the left here is the CSS that was created to display this little number. On the right, on a button, on a link. It can really be extended to anything. And if you look here, it's got this selector using the after tag on anything that has the class badge 1 and also has the data badge attribute. And it sets that content of that number there is coming from this attribute. There's this really cool CSS property called content that you can use with pseudo classes like after and before, and what it lets you do is dynamically insert content into the page. You can't insert HTML. It has to be just strictly text, and you are limited in how complex that lookup can be. So there is a special function called attr, which you can use to read the value from an attribute of the control. You can also just write it out statically. You can also put images in here. They have to be loaded using a URL, I believe. So content's really cool. Look into it if you haven't. And then everything else in here is just the styling around that badge. It's offset from the top and right, -10 pixels. The font size is a portion of an M. The M being the width of the letter M in the font family that you're using. The background is green, the font color is white, it's got a width and a height. That's really important. If you don't define a width and a height, sometimes these don't render quite right. And then it's got a line height of 18 to just sort of make it as tall as it is wide in terms of the font itself. And this border radius 50% is what's doing that curved border magic. So border radius can be a percentage. It can also just be a fixed value. We'll look at both of those things today. And we're going to do it with a live demo. And I've got 2 demos for you guys today. So the first one is located, at this site, which I'm going to escape out of here and drop that into the chat window if I can find it. There it is.
Hey, Sarah.
There you go.
Hey, Sarah. Yeah. What is CodePen.io?
We're going to go look at it. We're going to go to that site and look at it.
Great.
Yeah, so this is CodePen. CodePen.io is just a site where you can write up little mock-ups like HTML and CSS or even some JavaScript and just play with it live.
Is it kind of like JS Fiddle kind of thing?
It's like JS Fiddle, but the notion, like the bigger idea behind CodePen is like, oh, here's an example of like how I built badges, and then other people can come in and copy it. And I feel like that the visuals, like how this site is designed, is better than JS Fiddle. So I'm on here. I have my own account. You guys can come in here. You can actually play with this. But these all use that that pseudo selector, the after, and I've got two different ones in here. I've got a data badge 1 and a data badge 2. These two are that badge 1 type, and then this one is that badge 2 type because I wanted it to have a different background color. But this is just to show how this was implemented. So the first one is a button, which I'll kind of expand here, and it's got these properties. It has a class that I've given it, badge 1, and then a custom property called data-badge. You can add any sort of attributes into an HTML object that you want to track data and whatnot, and they're all accessible through JavaScript. And also you can reference them in CSS. And here I've given it a value of 12, which is the number you see in here. If I make this a different number, if I make it 0, then this over here will update to show you 0. If I make it 100, it will not look right anymore because now it's got 3 digits in it instead of 2. So it's going to start squishing out on the sides. You do have to size these little badge icons to be large enough to contain the longest string of text you plan to put in there. Otherwise, they can look a little funky when text gets too long. So there you go. There's an example. But this is it's really, really simple. Both of them have these position and font size information to kind of set up the framework for how to position other elements. So if you look at in this, so the first rule says it's position relative, the position of any object that has these class names. It has a relative position to the other object. And then the second one where we say data badge 1 or badge 1 data badge after. This has an absolute position. An absolute position doesn't really work unless you've given the other object some sort of like physical structure with the position in some cases. Sometimes it will work without having to do that. But in this case, we needed to do that to get this to render how we wanted. And then all these other settings, I recommend coming here and playing with them. I said this has a border radius 50%. I could change that to be like 12 pixels instead, which gives it round. Or you can even make it smaller. You can make it like 3, and now you've got like a rounded box shape instead of a circle. You can do a lot of really cool things with CSS in terms of shaping the borders. And I think somebody even went as far as to build there's this like classic teapot for like graphics rendering that's out there, and somebody was crazy enough to build one out of nothing but CSS borders. So you can do a lot of crazy stuff with them in terms of visual effects.
Cool. Now, question for you. If that, in the HTML, if that button didn't have an attribute called data badge, would the after thing not apply anymore? In other words, would it not have the circle?
No, it wouldn't. If I take it off, it won't have one.
Got it. Okay.
So it has to have that data badge. That's what this little box selector is. It's with attribute data badge. So I wonder if Control Z works. It does. Cool. This second example, I created another class to show how you could make these a little more interactive in here. It's called Hoverable, and all Hoverable does is it just changes the background color and the font color of the after element. So when you hover over the second one, you'll see how that changes to kind of, give it some more interactive in case you've got a situation where that's the only thing that you want. Or maybe, I don't know, if that's something you want to add, a visual indicator that your mouse has moved over and it's interactive, that's something you can do. And then this third one was just an example of how you can add a data badge, a badge notification to like it's an SVG icon. Where'd it go? There it is. So this is an SVG icon, this little cart, and I pulled it out of Alpha Anywhere. So this is actually one of our built-in icons. And I wrapped it inside of a div that has that badge name. And I need to do a little bit of other changes to it. I had to change how it was positioned, the top and the right, so that it was over top of the cart as opposed to way out in the corner. And I also made the background a different color to really show that that's different. So you can really overlay these things on anything. This just being a really basic example in HTML, it's also easy to get this stuff into Alpha Anywhere, which is going to be our second example. So I'm going to go back here. And this is our second example we'll take a look at, is I built this component that has a button in the UX header that you can display a badge on. And if we go in here to badge demo, this has been pre-built, so I just want to show you how this works. So this is that icon. It's a button. The button has been configured to be an image followed by text, and that text item is actually the badge, as opposed to doing a pseudo class, which gets a little. I found it was a little difficult to work with pseudo classes with the alpha style framework, because we use pseudo classes for buttons in the header to add things like the underline that appears sometimes. But I added these two buttons to show how you could do a really interactive badge. So this one adds the message, so pretending like messages are coming in or something like that. Every time I click it, it increments this badge value by 1. And then delete clears it out to 0. And we'll take a look at that button first. So the button is configured as image followed by text. I have the alpha envelope icon in here. I also set the class hover pressed and disabled to none, because it was resizing itself every time I moused over it, and that was not the behavior I wanted, and I wanted to keep this as simple as possible in terms of a demo for you guys. And then the button text actually does contain stuff. It has a span in it, and that span has an ID of button badge. It has a class name of badge, and I added that data badge attribute to it. And by default, I say display none. Don't want it shown initially when you come in there, because there's no reason to display a 0. But and when you saw me delete the messages, it didn't hide it again. We can fix that in this demo if we want to. So that's this span here. It has an ID. The ID does need to be unique. If you're gonna have like a whole bunch of these things, I recommend maybe using the dialog components ID to kind of make these more unique if you plan on displaying multiple instances of the same UX component on the page. If you don't plan on doing that, this is fine. And then in the properties of the component of the UX, over in the CSS SVG, local CSS definitions is where I defined that CSS. And it's pretty simple. I used that data badge selector, but because I've only applied the class name to that span, it's not actually necessary. But it has that absolute position. It has a distance from the top of the object that it's positioned absolutely to, so that would be the icon. So it's 12 pixels from the top of the icon element, and it's 12 pixels in. So 12 pixels down from the top and 12 pixels towards the left from the right, so in on that control. And then similar font size and line heights as before. I told the border radius was 9px this time instead of 50%, because 50% doesn't work in this context. And then aligned the text in the middle of the control of the span. So that is all you need to style that item. And we can even open the Chrome debugger here real quick and take a peek at this guy. So this is that span that we created, and then over here is all of the way we styled it. If you weren't sure what you needed, I do recommend coming in here and using the Chrome debugger because you can do things like play with the radius sizes and that kind of other settings just to see what you'll get. I don't know if you can tell if that's changing, or pick different colors to see if you like other colors. And it's all interactive right there. And when you're done, you can actually select all of this stuff right here and just copy it using the Control-C and Control-V keys. So in terms of updating the actual content and changing what the value is in that element, which I think is what most people will want to know how to do, you'll need to use some JavaScript. And I've used the $sign function here. That function is the equivalent of calling document.getElementById. And it does require that the object has a unique ID to get it. We've named it button badge, which you can actually see right here, but you couldn't see in the preview of the button text. So what this does is it gets a pointer to that HTML element. It checks to make sure it exists. If it does exist, it sets up the message count. And by default, we set the message count to 0. And then we use the A5UElement ATTR function to get the value of that data badge property. This could have been anything. I could have called it Sarah's badge data or number of messages as an attribute on the element. But we get that from our button badge. If we successfully find it, then we use this parseInt function to convert the value into a number. This might come back as a string. It might come back as a number. It's really good to just assume it came back as a string and parse it out. Otherwise, when you come down here to do message count plus equals 1, if you've put a string in it, it will just add 1 as a string. So you'll just have a bunch of extra ones off the end. So we convert that to an integer, assign it to the value of message count, and then increase the message count by 1, and then set the message count of data badge. So if you see here, if this fails, then the message count will be 0, we'll add 1, and then it will add data badge, and it'll set it to the value of 1. And then we also update the inner HTML. The inner HTML of that object is actually what is displaying the value. And then this ella.style.display equals block removes that, like the initial state where it was set to be display none on the span. This removes it and sets it to block so it's visible on the screen. And then delete message does something similar. It gets that element, the button badge element. If it exists, then it says the message count is 0. And it sets it to 0. It sets the display. It sets the display to none, so it's hidden again. And then it updates that inner HTML to be 0. So that's how those two functions work. If you were to do something like use like a, and there we go. If you wanted that to just be like a straight up regular old button, that's another way you could do a notification in terms of objects. Were there any questions about?
Yeah, so a question. So one that came in was, is there a way to adjust a regular sort of existing alpha button in a UX or grid so that it can have a badge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what this is. This is an alpha button.
Now, what about buttons that were like created by alpha, like those navigation buttons, for example, that you might insert, or I don't know why you would do it on a navigation button, but maybe you would like on a save button or something like that to let you know that, or submit or reset.
So that would just be, you would take this, here, let's just do this.
Mm-hmm.
We'll select it. Whatever, we'll just do that so I know to come back here. So you can do the same thing. This is an image followed by text. You can just have that submit and then add that span after. the magic of adding that badge. So it was on our submit button.
Mm-hmm.
Did it not save it? Here we go. Oh, double click always does that. Let's do, this might be a thing where it's displaying relative to the actual whole panel.
Mm-hmm.
Button text inline style. Button inline style. Okay. I'm not 100% expert on CSS. Some
Mhm.
of this stuff I still don't totally 100% get, like why you have to use position relative. But that,
So
adding
that's
that
it.
position
If you
relative
started
now,
tweaking
yeah.
the margins and the where
Yeah,
the
so
you
at this
could get it where
point,
you
I would
wanted
be
it.
like, oh, that's not where I want it. It's way too far in and it's way too far down. So then I would come in here and just use this arrow
Oh,
box
show us what you're
picker.
doing there, because I've seen that technique. Often my technique is to say that's off about 5, and I'll change it by 5 and go take a look at
No,
it.
no.
I know
Well, I
that's
mean,
the
that
dumb
works
way. I
if you can
know.
see the pixels, which I know you can.
There you go.
But you can, the Chrome debugger has this, it's select an element in the page to inspect it, which is it's the easiest way to get down to what the object is. And if you accidentally pick something that's like contains it, then you can kind of drill down. But
Sure.
this is where it's at. I know that's too far in. And the really cool thing about these properties over here is you can actually just use the arrow keys on the keyboard to change them. So I'm
So up
pressing
and
the
down
down
keys.
arrow and you can see
Gotcha.
how it moves in the direction I want it.
Oh, very
And
cool.
maybe I don't want the top that far down. Maybe I want it up here.
Yeah.
Maybe I do want this to be closer, like right there. And
Nice.
then once I've got that where I want it, I can just copy this. And before I assume that that actually works. I know it
Paste it to
works in
Notepad.
the browser, but sometimes, yeah, okay, I can just copy that. I can just select it and copy it. So that top and right are what changed. That's what I need. So I can then I can go back to the design and in here to my properties, into the CSS, and then change those like that. And now when I preview it, it should be where I want it to be.
Should be the way you adjusted it before. Got it.
Yeah, it should be.
And it is. Fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, that's very, very helpful. The Chrome debugger tools just, and this is true of all browser debugger tools, they just keep getting better and better. Yeah. So yeah, that's all you really have to do. And I find it a little bit easier to work with the method that uses some sort of like a span. You can even use a div if you wanted, a div or span, some sort of object to place these things, as opposed to trying to use the after pseudo class. I show that one because if you Google badge notification CSS, almost all the answers you find are going to use
That's the way they do it.
those
Yeah.
pseudo classes. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, I found with the sort of mousing over, okay, cancel, the mousing over of buttons in the, actually, let me put a button in there that actually has nothing changed about it. Oh, I put an image in there, didn't I? Oh, one of these days I'll get this right. Yes. Button. So this button, you see how it adds that dotted line on the bottom?
Mhm.
With the icon, for some reason, that was changing the total height of the image, and it was causing this guy to sort of like move in and then move out, and I didn't have enough time to figure out how to eliminate that weird behavior. But that's that's what I was talking about. That is a thing that uses the after selector to add that kind of stuff, and it's just easier to use at that span.
So another question that came in is, can you make the badge flash as a way of escalating the alert?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that, right, with
You can do
CSS
that. You can do it with
transforms?
CSS. You can do that with transforms. I don't know off the top of my head how you would do that, but I know you
Okay.
can do it. Yeah.
But it's CSS, and if you Google how to do it, that's just something else that you could add into the style.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, you can
Nice.
use transforms to change the color, the background color over a time period.
Great. Let me see if there are any more questions about badges. No, although the one question that a few people have asked is, would it be possible to get a copy of this component? So if you want to send it to me, I can attach it to the video when we post it. Might be the thing to do. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
The other thing to note while we're here is also there is the Amazon lookalike shopping app, which is basically what I pulled all that code out of, and that's
Oh, okay.
a component template.
So it's already built in.
It's already built in, yeah. And so it's actually inside of the control bar main bar, and it's this cart item,
Mhm.
and it's set up as image followed by text. And if you go look at the button text, it actually uses a CSS or a client-side template to display that div that has the cart badge CSS, which displays it as a badge, and that can be found in the CSS tab down here, right here at cart badge.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
Nice. So that looks like it as far as badge questions.
Oh, that's the exciting bug. I was going to log and not show you guys.
We'll take it out in post-processing.
Exactly.
Dave essentially has a full-time person doing that for me.
Who's a what? I missed it.
Oh,
I
have a full-time person just editing Dion's stuff before it goes live. Exactly.
My screw-ups and making it look good, and actually adding special effects. I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of my stuff, when it goes bad, there's like a little explosion on the screen.
It's all in post-production, right? Also, we blur out all your passwords and API keys.
We hired the guy from the Terminator series. I love his explosions. He does such a great job on it, blowing up them Terminators.
Great. All right, so here is a question that is not a badge question, and it's, is there a way to change the page icon from the default one that Alpha uses on the TabbedUI created page for an A5W? So you're using a A5W TabbedUI. Is there a way to change that page icon?
Page icon.
Oh, yeah. I think what that is the favicon.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is determined by what's called a favicon.
Okay.
And so we include one called Alpha, but there's actually on the basically what happens is the TabbedUI creates a A5W page, and then Alpha includes a off-the-shelf favicon in that. So if you want to change that, you can actually go in and insert your own favicon to do so. And I'm going to go on to, bear with me here. It's on the documentation side. And if you type favicon, it will tell you how to change your favicon. Now that's the icon for the whole application, so I'm not sure how you could do it. One thing that's super important that you need to know about favicons, and bear with me, I'm pasting it into there. It's in the chat window. The important thing about favicons to realize is that they're insanely cached, meaning you could modify this, do this change, and then load up your app and you're going to still see it. So you have to clear your cache on your browser because it's one of those things that they're just super aggressive about caching. People who are new to your site will get that immediately, whatever the current favicon is. So just a heads up, be careful about caching because that will be doing that. But it does make a big difference. You know, notice how up top you've got the little Alpha logo. Any web page has that favicon. We just use the same technology in Alpha.
Did that answer the question?
I believe it did. If they didn't, though, by all means, please type the question or clarify in the questions box so they go to Webinar Control Panel.
I did have a question come in over email if I want to go ahead and grab that one.
Yeah, go ahead and get that one. And then I also have a Kanban question as well. So
great. If you don't mind, I'll take control of the screen.
All right. Let me make you the presenter.
I'll permit it.
Bye-bye, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Sarah.
Okay, good. The question was this. I have a TabbedUI, and I'm not on the most pre-release, so that's where. So you'll have a situation where you'll open up different pages, or in your TabbedUI, you'll open up different items here, and you'll have them open. So the question was this: how could I close all of those tabs? And in particularly, how can I close all the tabs at one time? So if you'll notice, I'll go here, I created a little button on this UX. So each of these is a UX that gets launched. On here, I created a little piece of JavaScript on this, and watch, boom, goodbye. Okay, so it's very straightforward. Basically, and I'm going to copy this, there is a pre-built set of chat window, paste here. And there's one that also will close the current pane, so you can do it. But all you do is you create a button or any other entity on your UX and this UX, by the way, is getting opened inside of the TabbedUI. And then in here, you put in this little bit of JavaScript, and what that does is it calls the parent. So what it is that it's very specific, is that the UX is a sort of a child running inside of the TabbedUI. So it uses this specific nomenclature to say, hey, go up to my parent and tell the tab object at the parent to close all panes. And that will, or close all open panes, and that will go ahead and do that. So that's just a standard piece of JavaScript. And if you would like to have other ones, you can look online. There's also like close current pane. I forget what the name is, but you can actually say, so for instance, if I'm running this, and let me go ahead and cancel out here and run this thing, and I open up my UX here. Oh, no, that's the kind of run there. If I go here, obviously it will, if I click here, it's going to close that one by default, but you can also say just close itself. And so that allows you to do some other things. So for instance, you can add your own sort of way to close panes. The other thing that's kind of neat about that is that this close pane could be linked to, say, saving a record. So let's say you wanted to open up a record in a new item. Once you've saved it, you wanted to go ahead and close that pane for whatever reason, you could go ahead and take that little piece of action JavaScript, or actually JavaScript, and attach it to another action, and then close it all at once. So this came in over guides. We really appreciate those ahead of time questions, because we get to go figure out and make ourselves look smarter by being able to do it so quickly and so efficiently. But check that out, and this gives you a little bit more control over the information and structure and navigation within that. So that's called tab pane sort of manipulation. So that came in, just wanted to share that with everybody.
Quick question about the TabbedUI. Thanks, Dion, by the way.
Sure.
The TabbedUI, can it be used in mobile applications, or is it really meant for desktop?
Yes,
web?
it can. And in fact, if you go to the TabbedUI properties, there are two different styles, one called desktop and mobile. So let's go ahead and do this real quick. I'm going to go ahead and show you what it looks for. Now, it's not optimized for mobile, but it will work. And I'm thinking more of like tablet mode. So I'm going to go here and go to the mobile side. And we've shown before where, layout mobile, and go ahead and notice it's desktop web browser. I'm going to change this to mobile device. And now I'm going to do a working preview. Okay, so you'll notice that instead of, and actually, you know what, to make this most interesting, let's go ahead and just launch this into my full preview. So I'm going to launch it into my browser, so we show it actually in a browser environment. Okay. So you can see here that instead of doing the left menu and the right, it just creates a top level here. And so then I can click that, and it creates a mobile representation. If I go back to menu, and I think I'll have to check my styling. I don't use this a whole lot, but as you can see, it's more of a drill down, but it still has all these capabilities. So you can go into it, so it's call it like the poor man's version of creating a mobile app on that. It is not optimized for offline or anything else that you may want to do. So it's really up to you to kind of play with it there. But that's a quick and dirty way to turn a desktop TabbedUI into a browser. We've shown demonstrations, and we're doing it more and more. You can actually create your own TabbedUI using basically panel cards and expanding menu and a few other things like that. And we're seeing more and more people do that because then you can control down to every element how it's going to operate, meaning you can use the very powerful capability in a UX control, which we've talked about before, but there's a property called, where is it? Responsive rules. And in here, you can define rules saying, for instance, let's add a rule and I'll test this. You can say, for instance, if it is on a tablet, if it's mobile, it's this. You can inspect the current environment and then relay out your screen appropriately. So you can have a lot more control on many levels to create a more fundamental mobile experience. But that said, you can use the TabbedUI in the ability with this layout mode as kind of a quick and dirty way to create essentially a mobile version of that on your program. So that was a good question, and you are able to do that.
Very cool. So the person also asked maybe in a future session if we could do a demo with multiple pages for a UI. For a mobile app. In other words, instead of using, for example, a UX component to move from page to page, to use a tabbed UI instead.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We'll take a look at that. Let's see what we found here. Okay, so one comment was that changing the fave icon seemed to work for other pages, but not for the tabbed UI created page when they tested it out.
Well, interesting. So what I would do is you got to go into the tabbed UI, which in this case is here. This is the A5W page that was created. And in here, you have to set it here. So make sure you're in that tabbed UI page. It's not automatic. You can paste it in there. And again, the best way to test that, by the way, is to open up an incognito panel, because an incognito panel ignores all your current cache and allows you to kind of essentially do a fresh load of a A5W page, etc. So that's a good way to test things to make sure you're seeing that. But it should work because this is just a standard A5W page, so anything you put in here should render properly.
Right, it's just plain HTML.
Yeah. But if you still see that happening, send it to us. Might be a glitch or something like that we have to check out.
Cool. When you are using, so when you chose a moment ago the mobile desktop option for tabbed UI, does it automatically or automatically know which device it's on and adjust itself, or is it just one view for both of them?
No, it's one view. So the way you could do that is one method is to use, and it's kind of an older school method, but there's a control in here called, oops, wrong place. It's in here to there, go new. It's called, and again, it's not used as much anymore, but it's still valid. It's a web component and it's called, where is it? App Launcher. So what you do is you put this in your project, and there's some documentation on this that talks about it. And what it will do is this little launcher will detect what platform it is on, and from there it will send it to maybe one of two different tabbed UIs, one that's optimized for mobile and there. And again, this was our original kind of focus on making mobile apps, because you could kind of create two different sets of capabilities and then use this as a redirector on there. But then, more and more now we're just using UXs and other things like that have mobile built in it from the get-go. But this allows you to go through and set up and tell it exactly how it goes. So still valuable, still works, but not recommended because there's probably better ways to do it there in this situation. But you can avail yourself to this to basically say, oh, when my app launches, I want it to show a mobile optimized environment versus a desktop or optimized environment. And that's called the app launcher. And there is documentation both in the app, in the device or control itself, and also there's information also on our fabulous documentation website, which is managed by your truly, Sarah.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go over to a Kanban question.
Okay.
And the Kanban question is this. Is there a way to make a data field in the Kanban wrap so that it maintains the width of the column? I guess they're putting in a field that's too long and it's making the Kanban
interesting.
card look
Okay.
too long.
Good point. Let's go get out of there, go to our demonstration. Okay. Use our formatting one from last week. So we'll do a work preview. Okay, so he's saying, or this person, excuse me, is saying that they have like a lot of days. So let's try this out and see what it looks like. So I'm going to go into my static data. I'm going to go big cheese. I love cheese, especially cheese curds from Wisconsin. Go Packers. So I probably offended half the people now by just saying I love cheese. No, go Packers. And okay, so let's see here. Okay,
there we go.
So
yep.
I see what's going on is that it's consuming and it's actually kicked down things here. So what you can do is I believe, and I might need some assistance here, you can go to the company here and you can use an inline style, I believe, to reduce the width of that. So I'm going to go, first I'm going to fields here. I'm not sure if I do it. I think maybe it's on the list layout. Let's try this first. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to just edit the inline style and I'm going to go down here to positioning and size and I'll go width is 150 px. Okay. Let's see what happens. Okay, ignored that. So that's not how to fix that problem. So I'll go to fields. So the way we're going to do that is now what I'm going to do is go to my list layout. Now you'll notice here I'm using a list layout here and you'll see the structure of it and it could be with style.
Right, so what if you put company in a span, for example?
Yeah, I think you would put this in a span. So you go span with, let's first put in the span.
Where style equals, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I basically surrounded my company thing with a span. And let's see what happens here.
It's bound to work.
No, it's interesting. So I might have to do some research on that to answer your question because my first two guesses is not cutting it. Maybe let's try this. Well, that's 100% padding. I want to be careful not to mess with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. Because we tried field styling here. Oh, maybe try. Let's try this.
Okay, hang on.
Let's just do one other check. And that let's see. Nope, not yet. So we'll have to do a little research unless Sarah has any insights, but we'll figure that out and get that put as part of the response.
I think you need to change the white space rules. I think by default they're set to clip.
Someone is saying you have flex set to it. Flex, 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 they say.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
You could check the word wrap option too.
Oh, display flex. I don't know if that helps or it doesn't help.
Yeah, I think we're going to do some research.
All right, we'll come back with the right answer. How about that?
Yeah.
All right.
Good question, though. Excellent.
Yeah, very good question. That's one we should have answered just like that. Well, they stumped us. Good for them.
By the way, one of
the right answer though.
Just a other method here. Again, you probably want some wrapping into it, but one method is that depending on your source, let's say your source is SQL, you could in your view you could actually wrap it to a certain amount of characters or things like that. So you can adjust the data before it actually gets to the list there. But I can see where you'd probably want to have it so it wraps so it looked, you wouldn't have to be clipping off text and things like that.
Cool. Let's see. Someone else is asking about the Kanban app and can we make that available? So, Dion, if you haven't sent that over, and you may have already,
I'll
I can
double
get that
check
up.
and check
Yep,
that
and
out.
I'll just make sure. So the place you'll find that is when you go to look for our videos. In the description, we will put a. I don't think for YouTube. We're not allowed to put an actual link, but we can give you most of a link that you'll see. It might end at dot, like the word dot as in .com at the end. That should do it. For those of you actually looking for the videos, because someone else is there, let me go ahead and grab you the link for that as well. And I'm not seeing a lot of other questions.
I know. Wow. By the way, guess what's next week?
Oh, I know. It's Halloween.
I know.
So you will not be joining us next week, is that correct?
Yeah. Busy time of year, priorities.
Yep.
I think, what is the number now? Halloween's creeping up as far as the second largest expenditure after Christmas now.
Christmas, really?
Something like that in terms of consumer spending. It's just crazy.
Wow.
Yikes.
Fantastic.
Maybe it's Valentine's. Yeah, you got a lot of jewelry going on there, so that skews the numbers.
Cool. Oh, and I just found the demo and Q&A playlist, so I'm going to go ahead and paste that into the chat window. If you're looking for older versions of this.
By the way, notice the resemblance. Very close. Especially the smile. Look at it. Very, very close.
All right.
Wait, it's not a picture of you?
Oh, ow, wow. Brutal, tough crowd.
Oh, here's a good question.
Oh, good.
Does Alpha have a method for JSON data types? And the answer is, do we? You bet we do. But
yes, we do.
Does Alpha have a method for JSON data types? You want to maybe poke around in the documentation a little bit? Because I know you've done actually, in fact, if you take a look at that chat window for the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A playlist, I believe we've done multiple sessions just on JSON. But let's pop over here. Yeah.
There's actually an incredible, the first place to go for that is there is a amazing, complete, let's see, I wonder where is that at? It's, maybe it's in here. There's a whole discussion of JSON. It is, I read it like 3 times because it was so cool. I wish I could find it now. Where is that? It is so cool. It starts from like, nothing to all the different capabilities of it. Maybe it's this right here. No, that's expanding menu. Let's go to the documentation. Maybe it's in reference. Oh, where is that? I got to find it because it's super awesome. Basically, it takes, I don't know if that'll work there.
Oh, it looks like Sarah may have found it.
Yeah, that's so cool. Let me go ahead and grab that. This is the first place to start with. Okay. And so first, it literally goes on what's JSON to how to use JSON on the client side and how to use JSON on there. So it's like, literally, it starts with more of the JavaScript because JSON, it comes from the JavaScript world, meaning it was based on JavaScript objects. And it was taking JavaScript objects, which are a coding paradigm, and turning it into a textual and there's a lot of capabilities on turning, and you can see in here, this starts out immediately with showing you in Xbasic how you can create a pointer variable, and then from there parse that into either turn that into JSON or back. So, and you can see there's a whole video to it here. So go check that out. It's well worth your time because JSON is such a fundamental aspect of our projects, especially when you start doing more web API. It's just where the world is going. Eventually we won't speak English. We'll just transfer JSON packets back and forth between people is where we're going to go, beep, bop, boop. And so, but then it talks about how to use JSON and all the cool things you can do with templating. It's phenomenal. And actually, I got to give credit. I believe Selwyn put this together. This discussion, if you know nothing about JSON, by the time you go through this and watch the videos and stuff, you will be very comfortable and actually embrace JSON, because JSON has so many cool characteristics and it's such a mature technology. So check that out. You'll really enjoy it. I enjoyed going through it. It's like, oh, I get that. I see what it's doing now. And again, be cautious. There's a lot of little JavaScript that goes in there, and you'll see some JavaScript, but a lot of it is around using, Xbasic. But this is all transferable into the world of Python, Node.js, and other languages that we're embracing on the back end on this. So good stuff. Great question. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Dion. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and thank you, Sarah, for
like,
finding that link so quickly.
So here's a question. Can it consume and update to tables which have JSON data elements? And I believe the answer to that is yes as well, but you'll be, again, using Xbasic to do some of that.
Right. Now, because JSON, I know databases are doing more JSON extensions.
Right.
To
Some
them,
SQL Server things now have a JSON field type where you can do queries against the data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, if you look, we actually Alpha, way ahead of the curve, is we actually support JSON, so what are called NoSQL databases like MongoDB, which is the big one out there. And that basically uses JSON as a storage mechanism where, instead of creating tables and fields and stuff like that, you're actually storing chunks of JSON data, et cetera, in there. So we support it not only at sort of the alpha DAO level, which means we're treating it like a data source, but also within the code and the other pieces there. The reality is often JSON is just a text field in a database. That's how I think most people, and now they're doing specific extensions to make it easier for people to interact with JSON, because people are going to what are called key values, meaning if like the traditional method, just to spend a few moments on it, is that if I'm like creating, let's say I'm creating, actually, let me go ahead and show you this. So I'll go into Tools to the Database Explorer, and then I'll go in here. So this is showing me my database structure. So I have customers, and I have a customer table, and then I have a series of fields in each of those fields. So I would create my customer table, and I would create my fields. And let's say next week I want to go ahead and add a new field, which is like favorite cheese. So I go into customers, and I have to go edit that database. I'd have that field. Now I have to go and do all my other stuff there. How the world of NoSQL is going is you'll have a key value, like say, for instance, customer ID, then you'll have a single other field, which will hold all of your customer data in a JSON representation. So I'll actually create this as JSON and store it into one field. Now, later on, if I want to add that favorite cheese, I can do that in my Xbasic and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to save this customer. I'm going to include that in there. And if I read it, I'm going to default that favorite cheese to be null or whatever. So then you don't have to go in and change the database every time you want to make a modification. And so for certain types of apps, it's very flexible because you can go next week, I want to add some new data values. You don't have to go in and edit all your database. You just make some code changes and then you're good to go. It's a bit more of an advanced topic, and it's really related to what are called NoSQL databases. But more and more we're seeing that be embraced because it just makes things more, less fixed in structure in your applications. But just to let you know, we do support it, the ability with NoSQL databases and the Alpha DAO connection strings. And as we've shown, we have a very broad level of support at the I would call the programmatic level of JSON within it. And in fact, you'll see that, and I'll do this one last thing, is that if you've set up your what's called your extended user information capability, which is newer, it actually will help you, return and edit JSON from a column. There's some pretty cool stuff there, and that's in the extended user information table area. Let me see if I can find that real quick before we run out of time. Documentation, go to extended user, okay, and there it is. Okay, so I'm gonna grab this, go check that out, but there's this function here. So you'll need to notice that it actually will go in and you can say, give me all the information for this person, and it returns a set of JSON to it. And there's some other cool things around that where you can actually have one column that's just JSON for all your other things. So we're starting to move that direction. Right now, we're fairly still, rigidly structured into databases, but we're starting to make it so that more and more we're treating things as key value pairs. It makes things a lot simpler. So check that out.
Great. Well, Dion and Sarah, thank you very much for presenting today. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone who joined us today and who asked questions. I believe we will not be doing a webinar Wednesday next week for Halloween, but we will be back the following week after that. In the meantime, though, go ahead and send in your questions to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Thanks again. See you in 2 weeks. Take care and goodbye.